Hello guys, how y'all doing? This is Coach Russell, and today we are going to be learning what's called the Scholar's Mate. Now, the Scholar's Mate is one of the first openings that I learned how to play when I was a beginner, and I actually used this trick and was able to win a lot of games in the beginning of my career in chess tournaments. And I bet if you try these tricks, you can also get a couple of victories playing the Scholar's Mate. So I'm going to show you guys a couple of my games when I was a beginner. And a lot of these games were against my rival, Joseph. Joseph is a really good friend of mine, and even till this day, we still laugh and talk about, the Scholar's Mate, how we both were victims of Scholar's Mate when we were beginners. So the way they explained this to me is I have to realize what my opponent's weak pawns are or what my weaknesses are as well. And in the very beginning of the chess game, I know that the f2 pawn and the f7 pawns are the weakest pawns on the board. So in this Scholar's Mate, you're going to see me go after f7 a lot. And the way the game was played, I played pawn to e4 because right away my queen and bishop have availability to promote and also go after f7. My opponent Joseph played e5 and I played queen to h5. Notice going after f7. But not only am I going after f7, I'm also going after e5, h7. The only problem is that these two pawns are defended. So my opponent, Joseph, played knight to c6. And notice that when they play knight c6, it does defend the e5 pawn. So I can no longer capture on e5. So I brought in some help. Because remember, your queen cannot get checkmate by herself. She always needs help. And I played bishop to c4. So trying to create a helper mate by playing queen captures f7. Notice how both my queen and my bishop are attacking on f7. So if my opponent does not play queen to e7 or knight to h6 to defend this pawn, I can easily just play queen captures f7 and get a checkmate. Now notice that if the pawn captures, the king can still run away. So that's why it's really important to remember to always capture with the queen if they do not support f7. So my opponent Joseph, the first time I played him, he played knight f6. Now by playing knight f6, did he do anything to protect that f7 pawn? No. So I was easily able to win in 4 moves, and I played queen captures f7 checkmate. That was the first game that I played against Joseph. The next time I played Joseph, the game was a little bit longer, and the game went with e4, e5, queen to h5, knight to c6, bishop to c4. Notice again, I'm going after f7. But now, what Joseph decided to do was he defended f7 by playing knight to h6. Now, if my queen decides to capture, the knight can capture. So, I remembered this one tactic that my coach taught me, and it is called removing the defender. So, here, the only piece defending f7 is the knight on h6. So that means that I have to get rid of this knight. Now I don't want to get rid of it with the queen because the knight is protected by a pawn. So before you capture a piece, you want to calculate how many attackers, how many defenders, and the value. I know that the value of my queen is 9 points and the value of the knight is 3 points. So that is not a very good exchange. So by removing this defender, I want to get maybe somebody that's equal or less value. And the fastest person that can get to the h6 knight is the bishop on c1. At the moment, it cannot capture the knight because the bishop cannot jump over pieces. So that means that I have to move the pawn. And I did by playing pawn to d4. My opponent right away saw that I'm attacking his pawn. And beginners tend to make the first move that they see that is good. And my opponent played pawn takes pawn because the pawn was free. But he did not pay attention to my discovered attack, and now I played bishop captures h6, and I have gotten rid of the defender. Now again, if your opponent does not play queen e7 and they decide to capture your bishop, f7 was not defended, so always capture with the queen. And I played queen captures f7, checkmate. Remember, the king cannot capture because the bishop is protecting and the king can never place himself in check. So now it took me 6 moves to beat Joseph. And it was a really good game. We played again the next tournament. And I happened to be white again, and we always laughed about that because every time, I think the first 4 games that I played him, I was white, and I was able to win with this Scholar's Mate. And here, the third time I played him, I played pawn to e4. Joseph played e5. I played queen to h5. He played knight to c6. I played bishop to c4. Now here, my opponent, instead of playing knight to f6 or knight to h6, he now then played pawn to g6. Now my queen is under attack, so I know I have to move my queen. Now I have to figure out where can I move my queen and also put pressure on f7. So I looked at 2 squares that my queen can go to, f5 and f3. And then I realized this pawn is not only attacking my queen, but it's also attacking f5. So that left me with only one choice, to move to f3. Now I move to f3, and notice I'm still putting pressure on f7. My opponent then decided to play knight to d4. But of course, again guys, if they don't play queen e7 or knight h6, we play queen captures f7. So my opponent played knight d4, and I played queen captures f7, checkmate. I win. And again, remember, the king cannot capture because the queen is protected. That is called the helper checkmate, guys. So this game was, what, 5 moves long, which was a little shorter than the second time. Now I played them in a, I think the next tournament I played them, it was a regional chess tournament. It is a big tournament that happens in each region of Texas, and I happen to be in region 7, and I became a regional champion. The last round I played Joseph, and I was able to play the Scholar's Mate, but this time he was really well prepared. He didn't fall for the trick this time, but he fell for a different trick. So let me show you guys what happened in that game. So I played e4, he played e5, and then I played queen to h5. Now, here my opponent didn't play knight c6. My opponent decided to play g6. My queen is under attack. Now, I know last time that they played g6, I played queen f3 to attack f7, but this time my bishop is not on c4. And now I realize that, well, my queen is attacking here, h7 and e5. I never forget that I'm attacking those pawns. These two pawns. I was attacking f7, but now the g6 is blocking me from attacking, so now I'm attacking g6. But of course, if you can tell, g6 is protected not only once but twice, and h7 is protected by the rook. The only pawn that's not protected and hanging was e5. Now, another thing that I realized, that if my queen captures e5, it's also check, and I'm also attacking the rook. So right away I played queen captures e5 check. Now my opponent decided to block with his queen, and regardless if they block with the bishop or the knight, you can always in your next move play queen captures h8. Now my opponent decided to block with the queen because he said after I take his rook, he can capture my pawn on e4, and if I move my king, I can no longer castle. But now I'm gonna set him up for a trap, and I do notice that he's attacking this pawn and this pawn, but he can't attack this one because this is protected. So I set up a trap and I played bishop to e2, and right away my opponent moved super fast, didn't even think about what was gonna happen, and he played queen captures g2 because now he's thinking, I got a free rook, I got my rook back. So luckily I had studied this trick, and the only move that I'm able to defend my rook, can anybody find it? You can pause your video. That's correct, guys. Bishop to f3 is the only way to defend your rook. Now notice that even the bishop is being protected by the knight. So now the queen has to run away, and the only escape square that the queen has is g5. Notice that on h3 the knight can capture, g3 the pawn on h2 or f2 can capture, and the other squares, well, the queen also gets captured. So he played queen to g5. Also, I noticed a possibility of a discovered attack, but at the moment, if I was to push up the pawn, my bishop is not protected and they can easily just capture. So the next thing I looked for was hanging pieces, and I noticed that the knight on g8 is hanging. So right away I played queen captures g8. Plus I'm not in any trouble, so he only has the queen out, so I don't really feel a threat. So now I'm up a rook and a knight. My opponent then played knight to c6. Again, I want to push up this pawn, but I can't because the queen can easily capture my bishop. So I decided to play knight to c3. And by playing knight c3, now as you can tell, the rook defends my bishop. So my opponent played d6. I played d3, creating what's called a discovered attack. Notice that I didn't move my bishop here to attack his queen, but I moved my pawn, and all of a sudden my bishop happened to be attacking the queen. Now my opponent here played bishop e6, so I took his queen and he resigned. But I had another opponent who played queen to a5. Now here, I do see that I have a pin. And in one of the chess kit videos that you guys work on, it talks about putting pressure on the pin piece. So how can I put pressure on the pin piece here? Go ahead and pause your video, and I'll give you some time to look for it. And if you got bishop to h6, you, my friend, are correct. Bishop to h6, and of course your next move is about to be queen captures f8 check, protected. So notice that the bishop cannot capture your bishop because he cannot place himself in check. So guys, these are some tricks on the Scholar's Mate. Guys, I can guarantee you guys that if you do this trick with white, you will get a couple of victories, guys. And I know I was successful in getting wins, guys. So I would not be surprised, guys, if you also get victories by learning these cool tricks, guys. I know when I first learned the trick, when my coach taught me, guys, I would get really excited and I would try and do the tricks. I remembered when I first learned what a smothered checkmate is, you know, and I wanted to do a smothered checkmate. I tried to do it, and I learned from my mistakes, you know. And guys, just go out there, do your best, have fun, guys. And hope you guys remember the Scholar's Mate. Alright, guys, good job, guys, and I'll see you guys when school starts. Take care, guys.